Jasmine Taylor's face stung from the slap, blood rushing to her cheek as stunned passengers gasped in horror. The white flight attendant, Brittany, towered over her with rage-filled eyes. "Know your place," Brittany hissed, unaware the plane belonged to Jasmine's company. Security approaching. Before we dive into this shocking story, let me know where you're watching from in the comments. Hit that like button and subscribe if you want more stories about powerful women who overcome discrimination. Can you imagine owning a plane and being slapped on it? Stay tuned to see how Jasmine handles this situation. Long before Jasmine Taylor felt the sting of that slap on her luxury aircraft, she knew what it meant to struggle. Growing up in a cramped apartment in Harlem, she watched her single mother, Loretta Taylor, leave for work before sunrise and return long after sunset, juggling 3 jobs to keep food on the table. Their tiny 2-bedroom apartment, shared with Jasmine's grandmother and 2 younger siblings, was a far cry from the penthouses and private jets that would later define her life. Even as a child, Jasmine displayed exceptional intelligence. By age 8, she was reading at a high school level, devouring books from the local library where she spent hours while her mother worked. Her 3rd-grade teacher, Mrs. Washington, recognized her potential and began bringing her advanced reading materials, nurturing the young girl's hungry mind. "You're going places, Jasmine," Mrs. Washington would tell her. "Don't let anyone tell you different because of where you come from or what you look like." Those words became a mantra through Jasmine's adolescence as she encountered her first harsh lessons about race and class. Despite maintaining a perfect 4.0 GPA at her underfunded public high school, college advisors suggested community college or trade school rather than the Ivy League universities she dreamed about. When she expressed interest in business and finance, her white guidance counselor suggested she consider nursing or teaching instead, more suitable careers for young black women. Jasmine refused to lower her ambitions. She applied to Harvard Business School against all advice, writing an application essay about creating economic mobility through entrepreneurship. When the acceptance letter arrived with a full scholarship, her mother wept with pride. Harvard presented new challenges. As one of only 12 black students in her class, and one of only 3 from a low-income background, Jasmine faced both subtle and overt discrimination. White classmates assumed she was there to fill a quota. Professors sometimes overlooked her raised hand in discussions. Study groups accidentally scheduled meetings without informing her. Rather than breaking her spirit, these experiences sharpened Jasmine's resolve. She graduated at the top of her class, delivering a commencement speech that caught the attention of several venture capitalists. One of them, Victoria Bennett, offered Jasmine a position at her firm specializing in transportation innovations. 3 years later, at just 27, Jasmine spotted an opportunity that would change everything. Commercial airlines were struggling with customer satisfaction, and private air travel remained inaccessible to all but the ultra-wealthy. She envisioned a new model, Taylor Jet, a revolutionary approach to airline service that would combine the efficiency of commercial flights with the luxury of private travel. Victoria Bennett believed in Jasmine's vision enough to become her first investor. With initial funding secured, Jasmine built Taylor Jet from the ground up, focusing on impeccable service, innovative technology, and strategic route planning. She hired industry veterans who had been overlooked by larger airlines, creating a diverse leadership team that brought fresh perspectives to long-standing industry problems. Within 5 years, Taylor Jet disrupted the entire aviation industry. By age 35, Jasmine had become a billionaire through her majority stake in the company and strategic acquisitions of smaller regional airlines. Business magazines featured her on their covers, and industry awards lined her office walls. Despite her success, Jasmine never forgot her roots. She established a foundation providing scholarships to underprivileged youth, built community centers in neighborhoods like the one she grew up in, and implemented hiring practices at Taylor Jet that prioritized diversity and inclusion. One unusual habit separated Jasmine from other airline CEOs: she regularly traveled incognito on her own planes. Wearing casual clothes with her hair pulled back, no makeup, and carrying a backpack instead of her usual designer briefcase, she would book tickets under variations of her middle name. These covert trips allowed her to experience TaylorJet service exactly as customers did, noting areas for improvement that executive reports might miss. "The day I stop experiencing my own product is the day I lose touch with what matters," she often told her executive team. This philosophy frequently frustrated her executive assistant, Andre Johnson, who had worked with Jasmine since TaylorJet's early days. "You're worth $4 billion, Jasmine," Andre had argued that morning as she prepared for this particular flight. "You don't need to subject yourself to economy class and potential situations just to check on service quality. That's why we have mystery shoppers and customer feedback systems." Jasmine had laughed, slinging her backpack over her shoulder. "Mystery shoppers can't see what I see, Andre. Besides, I need to be on this flight to Paris anyway for the Beaumont Group meeting. This saves time." The Beaumont Group meeting wasn't just any business appointment. After months of negotiations, Jasmine was finalizing TaylorJet's acquisition of Air Elite, a struggling luxury airline with valuable European routes and airport slots. The deal would give TaylorJet immediate expansion into key European markets, positioning the company for global domination. "At least let me book you in first class under your real name," Andre had pleaded. "I already booked my ticket," Jasmine replied. "Middle seat, row 22. The authentic experience. You're going to regret this someday," Andre warned, shaking his head. "People don't always see past their own prejudices, even when dealing with billionaires." Jasmine's smile had faltered momentarily. Despite her wealth and power, she still encountered discrimination regularly. Just last month, a luxury car dealership salesman had directed her to the more affordable models until she mentioned her name. Last week, security at her own office building had stopped her in the lobby, demanding identification while white visitors walked past unchallenged. "That's exactly why I need to do this," she had told Andre firmly. "The day I start using my position to avoid the realities most black women face is the day I've failed my own principles." Little did Jasmine know how prophetic Andre's warning would prove to be, or how this flight would test those principles in ways she never imagined. The gleaming white and blue TaylorJet aircraft waited on the tarmac at JFK International Airport as passengers formed boarding lines according to their zones. Jasmine stood in Zone 4 wearing faded jeans, a simple black t-shirt, and white sneakers. Her naturally curly hair was pulled back into a modest ponytail, and oversized glasses completed her incognito look. The designer watch that usually adorned her wrist had been replaced with a basic digital timepiece, and her only jewelry was a pair of small pearl earrings, a gift from her mother on her first day at Harvard. She watched as first-class passengers boarded, recognizing several business executives who had attended industry conferences with her. None of them gave her a second glance in her current attire. The irony wasn't lost on Jasmine that she was essentially paying to be ignored on her own aircraft. When Zone 4 was finally called, Jasmine shuffled forward with the other passengers. At the gate, a flight attendant with kind eyes checked her boarding pass. "Enjoy your flight, Miss Washington," he said, using the variation of Jasmine's middle name that appeared on her ticket. As she entered the aircraft, Jasmine was greeted by Brittany Brooks, a senior flight attendant with perfectly styled blonde hair, immaculate makeup, and a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "Welcome aboard," Brittany said, her gaze already shifting to the passenger behind Jasmine before she had even finished the phrase. Jasmine made her way down the aisle, squeezing past passengers stowing luggage. She found row 22 and was surprised to see someone already occupying her assigned middle seat. "Excuse me," she said politely to the white woman sitting there. "I believe I'm in 22B. The woman barely glanced at Jasmine's boarding pass before responding, "I switched with the gate agent. I need an aisle seat for my condition." Before Jasmine could respond, Brittany appeared beside them. "Is there a problem?" she asked, addressing the white woman first. "I was assigned this seat," Jasmine explained, showing her boarding pass. Brittany glanced at it dismissively. "We've had some seat reassignments. You're in 28E now. But I booked this seat weeks ago, Jasmine said, keeping her voice level. And 28E would be a downgrade from my original assignment. Brittany's expression hardened. We need to keep the boarding process moving. If you have a complaint, you can take it up with customer service after the flight. Jasmine was about to identify herself when she remembered her purpose for traveling incognito. This was precisely the kind of service issue she needed to witness firsthand. She made a mental note about the seat reassignment policy before nodding and making her way further back to row 28. Row 28 was in the rear of the plane, near the lavatories. Her new seat, 28E, was indeed a middle seat, but in the center section between two larger passengers. As Jasmine approached, she noticed both armrests had already been claimed. Squeezing into the tight space, Jasmine introduced herself to her seatmates, a heavy-set businessman who barely acknowledged her and a college student who immediately put on headphones after a cursory nod. From her new vantage point, Jasmine observed the cabin crew's pre-flight preparations. Most flight attendants moved efficiently through their tasks, but she noticed Brittany spent considerably more time chatting with white passengers in premium seats than assisting those in economy. Another flight attendant, whose name tag identified him as Carlos Rivera, moved through the cabin with a genuine warmth that contrasted sharply with Brittany's performative professionalism. When he reached Jasmine's row, he greeted each passenger with the same respectful attention. "Can I help you with anything before takeoff?" he asked Jasmine. "Could I have some water, please?" she requested. "Of course," Carlos replied. "I'll bring that right away." True to his word, Carlos returned moments later with a bottle of water. As he handed it to Jasmine, he lowered his voice slightly. "I apologize for the seat change. That shouldn't have happened." Jasmine nodded appreciatively. "Thank you." As passengers settled in, Jasmine noticed several other interactions around her. A few rows ahead, an Asian American woman in a tailored business suit kept glancing in Jasmine's direction with a furrowed brow, as if trying to place her. Across the aisle, a white man in his 60s made no attempt to hide his disapproving glances at a young black family settling their children. The pre-flight safety demonstration began, with Brittany performing the motions with mechanical precision at the front of the economy cabin. When she reached the part about oxygen masks, her gaze locked with Jasmine's momentarily, a flicker of disdain crossing her features before she looked away. Jasmine pulled out her notebook, jotting down observations about the boarding process and initial service impressions. This was standard practice during her incognito flights, detailed notes that would later inform company-wide training and policy adjustments. As the plane taxied toward the runway, Jasmine overheard a conversation between two passengers behind her. "Did you see how that flight attendant treated that black woman?" one whispered. "Happens all the time," the other replied. "Some things never change, no matter how nice the airline." Jasmine added another note to her growing list. The engines roared as the aircraft accelerated down the runway, lifting into the air for the 8-hour journey to Paris. Little did anyone aboard realize that this routine transatlantic flight would soon become anything but ordinary. In the row ahead of Jasmine, the Asian American woman finally seemed to recognize her. She turned around, eyes widening in realization, before quickly facing forward again without saying anything. Jasmine had experienced this before, people who recognized her but weren't entirely sure, especially given her casual appearance. The businessman beside Jasmine shifted uncomfortably in his seat, taking up more than his allotted space. When she gently attempted to reclaim her armrest, he merely grunted and maintained his position. In the forward cabin, Brittany had begun the beverage service, her practiced smile appearing and disappearing as she moved from passenger to passenger. Jasmine watched as the flight attendant spent extra time chatting with a white executive type in premium economy, laughing at his apparently hilarious observations about Paris. The plane climbed to cruising altitude, and the captain's voice came over the intercom announcing they had reached 38,000 feet. As the seatbelt sign dinged off, Jasmine settled in for what she expected would be a routine, if somewhat uncomfortable, flight to Paris. She could never have predicted how quickly things would deteriorate, or how this journey would not only test her principles but potentially change the course of her company forever. Have you ever noticed how a single spark can ignite a wildfire of tension? As the Taylor jet flight settled into its cruising altitude, small interactions were already creating a combustible atmosphere that would soon explode into something much worse. 2 hours into the flight, most passengers had been served their choice of beverage, most, but not all. Despite Carlos making his rounds with drinks, Jasmine's section seemed mysteriously overlooked by Brittany, who was responsible for their area. When the beverage cart finally reached row 28, Brittany served both of Jasmine's seatmates efficiently. "And for you?" she asked the businessman to Jasmine's left. "Scotch, neat," he replied without looking up from his magazine. Brittany poured his drink with a flourish, adding a napkin and a small package of pretzels. "And you?" she asked the college student to Jasmine's right. "Coke, please," he said, removing one earbud. Again, Brittany served him promptly, complete with ice, napkin, and snack. Then, without even glancing at Jasmine, she began to push the cart forward. "Excuse me," Jasmine said. "Could I have some water, please?" Brittany paused, looking back with barely concealed annoyance. "We're out of water bottles on this cart. I'll have to come back." Jasmine nodded politely. "Thank you, I appreciate it." 30 minutes passed, then an hour. No water appeared. Across the aisle, Jasmine noticed a white woman receiving a bottle of water from the very same cart. When Brittany passed by again, Jasmine raised her hand slightly. "Pardon me, I'm still waiting for that water." "We're very busy with dinner service preparations," Brittany replied curtly. "You'll have to wait." The Asian American woman who had been observing these interactions turned in her seat. "I have an extra bottle if you'd like," she offered, extending a water bottle toward Jasmine. "Thank you," Jasmine said gratefully, accepting the water. "I'm Sophia Chen," the woman introduced herself quietly. "And I think I recognize you from," Brittany suddenly reappeared. "Seatbelts need to remain fastened," she interrupted, despite the seatbelt sign being off. "And please face forward during the flight." Sophia raised an eyebrow but turned around. Jasmine noticed the flight attendant made no such demands of other passengers conversing across rows. As dinner service began, Jasmine observed more discrepancies. White passengers were given choice of meals while supplies lasted, but when the cart reached her row, Brittany announced, "Only chicken left," without offering options. When Jasmine requested a blanket for the increasingly chilly cabin, Brittany informed her they were all distributed, yet 20 minutes later, Jasmine watched as the same flight attendant provided a blanket to an elderly white man across the aisle. That man, who Jasmine would later learn was named William Parker, seemed to be developing a rapport with Brittany. Their conversation, just loud enough for nearby passengers to hear, took a concerning turn. "Standards just aren't what they used to be," William commented as Brittany poured his second scotch. "I know exactly what you mean," Brittany replied with a knowing look. "Some people just don't understand proper airplane etiquette. They think the rules don't apply to them." Her gaze flickered toward Jasmine for a fraction of a second. "In my day," William continued, "people knew their place when traveling. Now everyone thinks they deserve first-class treatment." "We do our best," Brittany sighed dramatically, "but some passengers make our jobs so much harder than they need to be." Carlos, passing by with a trash collection bag, overheard this exchange and frowned slightly. When he reached Jasmine's row, he leaned down under the pretense of collecting her empty cup. "I'm sorry about this," he whispered. "If you need anything, just signal me directly." Jasmine nodded appreciatively. She'd been taking mental notes about both flight attendants. Carlos would definitely be receiving recognition in her post-flight report. As the dinner service concluded, Jasmine decided to work on her presentation for the Beaumont Group meeting. She carefully removed her laptop from her backpack, opening it on the tray table that barely accommodated its size given her cramped middle seat. The spreadsheet she needed to review contained projections for the Air Elite acquisition, confidential numbers that would dramatically impact TaylorJet's European expansion. She angled the screen away from her seatmates and began reviewing the data. Just as she was deep in concentration, analyzing potential cost synergies between the airlines, a jolt of turbulence shook the cabin. Simultaneously, Brittany appeared with the beverage cart for a post-dinner service. As the plane steadied, Brittany reached across Jasmine to serve the businessman his third scotch. Whether by accident or design, Jasmine would never be certain. Brittany's arm knocked a full cup of orange juice directly onto Jasmine's laptop keyboard. "Oh!" Brittany exclaimed with exaggerated surprise as liquid seeped into the computer's keys. "You really shouldn't have that out during beverage service." Jasmine quickly lifted her laptop, turning it upside down as the businessman cursed about juice splashing on his pants. Orange liquid dripped from the keyboard as the screen flickered, then went black. "My presentation," Jasmine said, the calm in her voice masking rising panic. The Beaumont Group meeting was critical. Without those projections, the entire acquisition could be jeopardized. "You should be more careful with your belongings," Brittany said, handing a single napkin to Jasmine while providing the businessman with a stack. "Electronics and liquids don't mix." Jasmine took a deep breath. "This was not my fault. I'd like your employee number to file a report." Brittany's pleasant mask slipped, revealing a flash of anger. "Are you threatening me?" "I'm requesting standard information for a service complaint," Jasmine clarified, still working to dry her laptop. "You people always want to make everything about you," Brittany hissed, voice low but intense. "I have worked for this airline for 15 years, and I know when someone is trying to get a free upgrade or compensation they don't deserve. You people." Jasmine repeated, her eyebrows raising. "Listen closely," Brittany leaned in, whispering so only Jasmine could hear. "I can make sure your flying privileges with this airline are reviewed. We keep track of problem passengers." Sophia Chen, who had been listening to the exchange, turned again in her seat. "Excuse me, but I witnessed what happened. This passenger did nothing wrong." "This doesn't concern you," Brittany snapped. "Actually, I'm an attorney," Sophia replied calmly, "and I believe what I just witnessed could constitute harassment." Brittany's face flushed red. She opened her mouth to respond when the seatbelt sign suddenly illuminated with a ding. The captain's voice came over the intercom. "Ladies and gentlemen, we're experiencing some unexpected turbulence. All passengers and crew should return to their seats immediately and fasten seatbelts." Brittany shot a final glare at Jasmine before securing the beverage cart and moving toward her jump seat. The turbulence provided a momentary reprieve from the confrontation, but Jasmine knew the incident was far from over. She continued attempting to revive her laptop without success. The device, containing all her preparation for the Paris meeting, appeared to be completely damaged. What would you do if you were in Jasmine's position? Would you reveal your identity to stop the discrimination, or continue gathering evidence about the poor service? Comment number 1 if you think she should reveal she owns the airline, or number 2 if you think she should stay undercover longer. Don't forget to like and subscribe to see how this tension escalates into something much worse. But wait until you see what happens next when Jasmine needs to use the restroom. 4 hours into the flight, the tension that had been building between Jasmine and Brittany was about to reach its explosive climax. The cabin lights had been dimmed to allow passengers to rest, though many remained awake watching movies on their screens or reading under the soft glow of overhead lights. Jasmine had spent the last hour trying to salvage data from her damaged laptop without success. The Beaumont Group meeting was now less than 24 hours away, and without those projections, she would be walking in significantly underprepared. Years of business experience had taught her to always have contingency plans, but this particular situation fell outside even her careful planning. After giving up on the laptop, Jasmine placed it back in her bag and tried to rest. However, the 3 cups of tea she'd consumed earlier, served reluctantly by Brittany after Carlos had insisted, now demanded attention. She unbuckled her seatbelt and carefully navigated past her sleeping seatmate toward the aisle. The rear lavatories showed vacant indicators, and Jasmine made her way toward them. Just as she approached, Brittany stepped into her path, blocking access to both restrooms. "These lavatories are being cleaned," she stated firmly, despite no cleaning cart being visible. "How long will that take?" Jasmine asked reasonably. "I'm happy to wait." "At least 30 minutes, Brittany replied. "You'll need to use the facilities in the forward cabin." Jasmine nodded and turned to walk toward the front of the plane. As she did, she noticed a white woman approaching from the opposite direction. To Jasmine's surprise, Brittany stepped aside. "Right this way, ma'am," Brittany said to the white passenger, opening the lavatory door that had supposedly been being cleaned. Jasmine paused, observing this interaction with disbelief. Rather than confronting Brittany immediately, she continued forward, watching as similar scenarios played out. White passengers were directed to the supposedly closed rear lavatories, while Jasmine was sent on a lengthy walk to the front. When she reached the forward lavatories, Jasmine found a line of 4 people waiting. After 15 minutes, she finally reached the front of the line, only to hear the captain announce that they were experiencing mild turbulence and all passengers should return to their seats. With growing discomfort, Jasmine made her way back to row 28. As she passed row 15, she noticed both William Parker and Brittany watching her with barely concealed smirks. Another 20 minutes passed before the seatbelt sign turned off again. By this point, Jasmine's need had become urgent. She once again made her way to the rear lavatories, which now showed vacant indicators. Just as she reached for the door handle, Brittany appeared again. "I told you these are closed for cleaning," she said loudly, drawing attention from nearby passengers. "They show as vacant," Jasmine pointed out calmly. "And I've observed several other passengers using them in the past half hour." "They were using the other facilities," Brittany insisted, though both lavatories clearly showed available. "I really need to use the restroom," Jasmine said, her voice level but firm. "I've been waiting for nearly an hour now." "You need to follow crew instructions," Brittany said, raising her voice further. "That's a federal regulation." By now, several passengers were watching the interaction. Among them was a white businessman in premium economy who Jasmine hadn't noticed before. Gregory Walsh, a marketing executive for a tech company, had been observing Brittany's behavior throughout the flight and had begun recording discreetly on his phone. "I am following instructions," Jasmine replied. "I went to the forward lavatories as directed, waited in line, and was then told to return to my seat due to turbulence. The seatbelt sign is now off, these facilities show as available, and I need to use them." Brittany's face hardened. "You're being difficult and disruptive." "I'm simply requesting to use an available restroom," Jasmine countered. "How is that disruptive?" "Your tone and attitude are inappropriate," Brittany said, loud enough for everyone nearby to hear. "This is exactly the kind of behavior that makes air travel unpleasant for everyone." Sophia Chen, who had been watching the scene unfold, stood up. "Excuse me, but this passenger has been nothing but polite. You're the one creating a disruption." Brittany ignored her, focusing her ire on Jasmine. "Do you make a habit of causing problems when you fly?" "Actually, I fly quite frequently," Jasmine responded. "I'm a frequent flyer with this airline and several others, and I'm well aware of my rights as a passenger." Brittany let out a derisive laugh. "A frequent flyer? In economy middle seats? My seating preference doesn't invalidate my status," Jasmine said. Several nearby passengers nodded in agreement. "Listen," Brittany said, lowering her voice to a harsh whisper, "people like you always think you deserve special treatment. You probably scammed your way into that frequent flyer status anyway." The thinly veiled racism in the comment wasn't lost on anyone within earshot. Gasps came from several passengers, and Gregory Walsh adjusted his phone to ensure he captured the exchange clearly. Jasmine straightened her shoulders, her patience reaching its limit. I would like to speak to the purser or the captain about your conduct. You think the captain has time for your complaints? Brittany scoffed. Who exactly do you think you are? I'm the CEO of a company, Jasmine stated simply, still not specifying which company. Brittany burst into laughter. Right, and I'm the Queen of England. A CEO wouldn't be sitting in economy dressed like that. You have no idea who I am or what I do, Jasmine replied evenly. And regardless of my profession, I deserve to be treated with basic respect. Respect is earned, Brittany sneered. And you haven't earned anything from me. The confrontation had now drawn attention from passengers throughout the rear cabin. Carlos appeared, concern evident on his face as he assessed the situation. Is everything all right? He asked, looking between Jasmine and Brittany. This passenger is refusing to follow crew instructions and becoming belligerent, Brittany said before Jasmine could respond. That's not true, Sophia interjected from her seat. Your colleague has been preventing this woman from using the restroom while allowing others to do so. Carlos looked confused. The lavatories aren't being serviced right now. They're available for all passengers. That's what I've been trying to explain, Jasmine said. Brittany's face flushed with anger. You're undermining my authority, Carlos. I've told this passenger repeatedly that these facilities are not available to her. To her specifically? Carlos asked, his expression shifting from confusion to concern. To anyone, Brittany backtracked quickly. But she keeps arguing and questioning my instructions. Because they don't make sense, Jasmine said, her composure finally beginning to crack under the pressure of both her physical discomfort and the blatant discrimination. You've allowed multiple other passengers to use these exact restrooms while repeatedly directing only me elsewhere. William Parker chose this moment to interject from his seat. The flight attendant is just doing her job. Some people think they're above the rules. What rules? Sophia challenged. The arbitrary ones being applied to only certain passengers. The tension in the cabin was palpable. Other flight attendants had noticed the commotion and were watching uncertainly from their stations. Passengers exchanged uncomfortable glances, some recording the incident on their phones, others pretending to be absorbed in their entertainment screens. Jasmine took a deep breath, centering herself. I am going to use this restroom now, she stated calmly, reaching again for the door. What happened next occurred so quickly that later, when reviewing the numerous videos captured by passengers, investigators would have to slow the footage to fully document the sequence of events. As Jasmine's hand touched the door handle, Brittany grabbed her wrist. Don't you dare defy me, she hissed. Jasmine gently but firmly removed Brittany's hand from her arm. Do not touch me, she said, her voice quiet but resolute. That's assault. Something in Brittany snapped. Whether it was the challenge to her authority, the public nature of the confrontation, or deep-seated prejudices finally boiling over, no one could later say for certain. You people always play the victim, she spat, her face contorted with rage. And then, with dozens of witnesses and multiple cameras recording, Brittany Brooks drew back her hand and slapped Jasmine Taylor, Billionaire CEO and owner of the very aircraft they were flying in, hard across the face. The sound of the slap seemed to echo through the suddenly silent cabin. Jasmine's glasses flew off, landing several feet away. A red mark immediately began forming on her cheek as she staggered backward from the force of the blow. For a moment, no one moved. Passengers and crew alike froze in shock at the violent escalation. Then, as reality sank in, chaos erupted. The stunning silence that followed Brittany's slap lasted only seconds before the cabin erupted into shocked exclamations and urgent movement. Jasmine steadied herself against the lavatory door, her cheek burning from the impact. Her mind processed the situation with the same analytical clarity that had built her business empire, documenting details, assessing options, calculating next steps. Carlos was the first crew member to react, rushing forward to place himself between Jasmine and Brittany. What have you done? He asked Brittany in horrified disbelief, before turning to Jasmine. "Ma'am, are you alright? Let me help you." He retrieved Jasmine's glasses from where they had landed, thankfully unbroken, and gently handed them back to her. Brittany seemed momentarily frozen, as if she herself couldn't believe what she had just done. Her hand remained suspended in the air, her face transitioning from rage to dawning horror as she registered the dozens of passenger eyes fixed on her, many holding up phones that had captured the entire incident. "She provoked me," Brittany stammered, the weakness of the excuse evident even to herself. Gregory Walsh stood from his seat in premium economy, holding his phone aloft. "I recorded everything," he announced loudly. This woman did absolutely nothing to provoke an assault. In fact, she was remarkably patient despite persistent harassment. From further up the cabin, William Parker rose unsteadily to his feet. "Now hold on," he protested. That passenger was being disruptive and refusing to follow crew instructions. The flight attendant was merely attempting to maintain order. Sophia Chen, who had been watching from her seat, stood as well. "I'm an attorney with Chen and Associates," she stated clearly. What we just witnessed was assault and battery, preceded by what appears to be clear discrimination. "I've been documenting this flight attendant's behavior toward this passenger since boarding." More passengers began speaking up, some defending Jasmine, others questioning what had led to such an extreme reaction. The cacophony of voices grew louder as flight attendants from other sections rushed to the rear cabin to assess the situation. Through it all, Jasmine remained remarkably composed. She gently touched her cheek, which was now visibly red and beginning to swell slightly. "I don't require medical attention," she said when Carlos asked if she needed first aid. "But I would like to speak with the captain, please." Before Carlos could respond, a tall man in an unassuming polo shirt and jeans stood up from a few rows ahead. Federal Air Marshal Davis, he identified himself, showing credentials. "I need everyone to remain calm." He approached Brittany with practiced authority. "Ma'am, I need you to return to the crew area immediately. You are being temporarily relieved of duties pending investigation of this incident." Brittany's face drained of color. "But now, please," the air marshal interrupted firmly. As Brittany was escorted toward the forward cabin, the captain's voice came over the intercom system. "Ladies and gentlemen, this is Captain Reynolds speaking. We've been informed of an incident in the main cabin. Please remain in your seats with seatbelts fastened while we address the situation. Your safety is our primary concern." The air marshal turned to Jasmine. "Ma'am, would you be willing to provide a statement about what occurred?" Of course, Jasmine agreed, still maintaining her incognito identity. "Though I'd prefer to do so privately." Carlos guided Jasmine to an empty row that had been reserved for crew rest. "Please sit here for now," he offered. "I'll bring you some ice for your cheek." As Jasmine settled into the seat, her phone began vibrating in her pocket. The screen showed Andre's name and a text message, "Call me now." Excusing herself from the air marshal for a moment, Jasmine stepped into the now available lavatory and returned Andre's call. "Jasmine." Andre's voice was urgent. "Are you okay? It's all over social media already." "What is?" Jasmine asked, though she already suspected the answer. "You getting slapped by a flight attendant. Someone live-streamed it, and now it's everywhere. CNN is picking it up. The company's PR team is blowing up my phone." Jasmine closed her eyes briefly. "How bad is it?" The video doesn't show what led up to it, but it clearly shows a Taylor jet flight attendant slapping a black female passenger. "People don't recognize it's you yet, the quality isn't great and your back was partly to the camera, but it's a PR nightmare for the company regardless. Has anyone connected me to it?" "Not yet, but it's just a matter of time." "What do you want me to do?" Jasmine considered her options. The original purpose of traveling incognito had been to experience authentic service quality. She had certainly achieved that objective, albeit in the worst possible way. "Don't confirm or deny anything yet," she decided. Let me handle this from here. The Beaumont group meeting might be delayed, my laptop was damaged earlier in the flight. Damaged? What happened? I'll explain later. For now, please have the legal team standing by, and ask them to prepare a statement acknowledging the incident without specifics. After ending the call, Jasmine returned to find the air marshal and Carlos waiting. A fresh commotion had started near the front of the plane. The captain has decided to divert to Shannon Airport in Ireland, Carlos explained. It's the nearest suitable airport, and will be landing in approximately 40 minutes. Is that necessary? Jasmine asked, concerned about the impact on all passengers' travel plans. Standard procedure for assaults on board, the air marshal explained. Ms. Brooks will be removed from the aircraft and detained by local authorities pending possible charges. The captain made another announcement confirming the diversion, causing groans from many passengers. Jasmine felt a pang of guilt for the disruption to everyone's plans, even though she had done nothing wrong. Carlos handed her an ice pack wrapped in a cloth napkin. For your cheek, he said kindly. I'm so sorry this happened. I've never seen Brittany act like this before, though she's always been difficult. It's not your fault, Jasmine assured him, pressing the ice pack to her face. You've been professional and helpful throughout the flight. As the plane began its descent toward Shannon, Sophia Chen approached Jasmine's row. Ms. Taylor, she said quietly, confirming she had indeed recognized Jasmine. I wanted to check if you're alright and to offer my services if you need legal representation. Jasmine smiled slightly, wincing at the pain in her cheek. Thank you, Ms. Chen. I appreciate the offer, though I suspect my company's legal team will be handling this matter. Sophia nodded understanding. Of course. Still, what happened was inexcusable. I've been documenting the pattern of discriminatory behavior since the beginning of the flight. Gregory Walsh approached next, introducing himself. I have clear video of everything that happened, from the lavatory confrontation through the assault. It's at your disposal if you need it. Thank you, Jasmine said sincerely. That may be very helpful. As the plane descended through clouds toward the Irish coastline, Jasmine's phone lit up with another message from Andre, Paris team informed of delay. Beaumont Group agreed to postpone until tomorrow afternoon. Also, Taylor Jet stock down 3% already on news of incident aboard one of our flights. The financial impact didn't concern Jasmine, stock fluctuations were temporary, and the company was financially solid. What troubled her more was the reality that even in her own company, on her own aircraft, she had faced the same discrimination that plagued black women regardless of their status or achievements. The captain announced their final approach to Shannon Airport, where Irish authorities would be meeting the flight. As passengers prepared for the unscheduled landing, Jasmine made her decision. She would maintain her anonymity a little longer, gathering all the facts before revealing her identity. The plane touched down smoothly on Irish soil, taxiing to a remote stand where police vehicles and airport security waited. As they came to a stop, the captain made one final announcement. Ladies and gentlemen, we apologize for this unscheduled stop. Local authorities will be boarding to address the incident that occurred. After that, a representative from Taylor Jet's European office will also board to speak with affected passengers. We ask for your continued patience. Within minutes, Irish police boarded the aircraft and were briefed by the air marshal. They proceeded to the crew area where Brittany had been isolated, emerging shortly after with her in custody. As she was escorted past Jasmine's row, Brittany kept her eyes down, her earlier confidence completely evaporated. After Brittany's removal, a man in a Taylor Jet corporate uniform boarded. He was introduced as Raymond Phillips, the airline's regional director for European operations. He hadn't been summoned by Jasmine and clearly had no idea that the company's CEO was among the passengers. Raymond moved directly to where Jasmine sat with the ice pack still against her cheek. Ma'am, he began with practiced corporate sympathy, on behalf of Taylor Jet, I want to extend our sincerest apologies for the inexcusable behavior of our employee. I assure you that this incident does not reflect our company values or standards. What will happen now? Jasmine asked, curious how her own executive would handle the situation without recognizing her. We'll be continuing to Paris once authorities complete their report. The flight attendant has been removed and suspended pending termination proceedings. We would like to offer you compensation for this terrible experience, including an upgrade to first class for the remainder of the journey and a voucher for future travel. Jasmine nodded thoughtfully. I appreciate that, but I'm more concerned about the systemic issues this incident might reveal. Has Taylor Jet had similar complaints about discriminatory treatment before? Raymond shifted uncomfortably. I'm not at liberty to discuss internal matters, but I can assure you that Taylor Jet takes all allegations of discrimination extremely seriously. Our CEO, Ms. Taylor, has made diversity and inclusion central to our corporate values. The irony of his statement wasn't lost on Jasmine. I'd like some privacy for the remainder of the flight, if possible, she requested. Of course, Raymond agreed quickly. We'll arrange that immediately. As Raymond moved on to address other passengers' concerns about the delay, Jasmine received another text from Andre, media requesting statements. Video now viral with 10M plus views. Paris clients have seen it and are concerned about Taylor Jet's reputation. CEO of Air Elite suggesting postponing acquisition talks until situation is resolved. The stakes had just gotten higher. What had begun as a routine incognito flight had evolved into a crisis that threatened not only Jasmine's dignity but potentially the major business deal she'd been working toward for months. As the flight prepared to resume its journey to Paris, Jasmine Taylor, billionaire, CEO, and victim of assault on her own aircraft, began formulating a response that would transform this painful incident into meaningful change. As the Taylor Jet flight resumed its journey from Shannon to Paris, a palpable tension lingered throughout the cabin. Passengers spoke in hushed tones, occasionally glancing toward Jasmine, now the reluctant center of attention. The incident had transformed a routine transatlantic crossing into what would later be described by CNN as a flashpoint in the ongoing conversation about race, privilege, and power in America. Have you ever witnessed discrimination firsthand? The kind that makes your blood boil with injustice? For Jasmine Taylor, this wasn't just another incident to endure silently, it was becoming a watershed moment that would define her legacy. With Brittany removed from the flight, Carlos had been promoted to senior flight attendant for the remainder of the journey. He moved through the cabin with heightened attentiveness, ensuring every passenger received impeccable service. When he reached Jasmine's row, now a full row to herself following Raymond Phillips' arrangements, he provided fresh ice for her still swollen cheek. We'll be landing in Paris in about an hour, he informed her quietly. Is there anything else you need? Just some time to think, Jasmine replied. Thank you for your professionalism throughout all of this. Carlos nodded appreciatively. If I may say so, he added in a lower voice, many of us have noticed the discrimination that happens on flights. Most of us try to counteract it, but it's challenging in this industry. Jasmine regarded him thoughtfully. Have you worked for Taylor Jet long? 3 years, he answered. It's actually better than most airlines I've worked for, but there are still issues, especially with some of the more senior staff who came from legacy carriers. This information added another dimension to Jasmine's growing assessment of the situation. Despite her efforts to create an inclusive culture at Taylor Jet, old biases clearly persisted in ways that weren't reaching executive reports. Her phone buzzed again with updates from Andre, who had become her lifeline to the unfolding external situation, video now at 25M views. #flight attendants lap trending worldwide. Major news networks running the story. Taylor Jet stock down 7% and falling. Followed immediately by, Beaumont Group CEO called. They're watching situation closely. Says it may reflect on leadership culture at Taylor Jet. The implication was clear, the acquisition deal was in jeopardy. Months of negotiation, financial modeling, and strategic planning might collapse because of one employee's racist behavior. Jasmine scrolled through news coverage on her phone, reading headlines that grew increasingly sensationalized. Slapped in the sky. Black passenger assaulted by Taylor jet flight attendant. Airline racism caught on camera. Social media erupts. Taylor jet faces backlash after employee assaults passenger. None of the reports had identified her yet, but it seemed only a matter of time. She noticed with some satisfaction that most comments on the story supported the passenger, her, and condemned the flight attendant's actions. Sophia Chin approached Jasmine's row again, sliding into the seat across the aisle. "The internet is on fire with this story," she said, showing her own phone. "I've been contacted by 3 news outlets already, asking if I can connect them with the victim." "What did you tell them?" Jasmine asked. "Nothing yet," Sophia replied. "I wanted to respect your privacy. But as an attorney, I should advise you that this story has legs. It's becoming about much more than one incident." Jasmine nodded thoughtfully. "It always is about more than one incident. This happens to black women every day, just usually without cameras rolling." As they spoke, Gregory Walsh approached from Premium Economy. "Pardon the interruption," he said, "but I thought you should know my video has been picked up by CNN. They're blurring your face for now, but people are already speculating about your identity in the comments." "Thank you for letting me know," Jasmine said. "For what it's worth," Gregory added, "I travel weekly for work, and I've seen this kind of treatment before. Never this extreme, but the pattern is unmistakable. Maybe this incident will finally force some accountability." As Gregory returned to his seat, Jasmine reflected on his words. Accountability was indeed what was needed, not just for Brittany Brooks, but for an entire system that enabled such behavior. Her thoughts were interrupted by another message from Andre. "Board members calling emergency meeting. PR team drafted statement condemning incident without specifics. Legal preparing for potential lawsuit. Should I tell them you're the passenger?" Jasmine replied, "Not yet. I'll handle it in Paris." She looked up to find William Parker standing awkwardly in the aisle. The elderly man who had supported Brittany throughout the flight now appeared uncomfortable under the collective disapproval of nearby passengers. "I may have misjudged the situation," he said stiffly. "While I still believe in respecting crew authority, the physical contact was clearly inappropriate." His non-apology hung in the air between them. Jasmine simply nodded, neither accepting nor rejecting his statement. As William retreated to his seat, Carlos returned with an update. "We've begun our descent into Paris. The captain asks if you would be willing to disembark last. There are media waiting at the terminal." News traveled fast. Jasmine agreed to the arrangement, using the time to finalize her approach. The original plan, to attend the Beaumont Group meeting incognito, was clearly no longer viable. It was time for Jasmine Taylor, Billionaire CEO, to step out from behind the curtain of anonymity. As the plane touched down at Charles de Gaulle Airport, passengers erupted into spontaneous applause, whether for the safe landing or in solidarity with Jasmine wasn't clear. The captain's voice came over the intercom one final time, "Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Paris. Local time is 10:22 a.m. Please remain seated until we reach the gate. I've been informed that representatives from Taylor Jet's executive team are waiting to address the incident that occurred during our flight. Thank you for your patience during this unusual journey." Looking out the window, Jasmine could see the gathering media presence, cameras and reporters positioned strategically near the jet bridge. She also spotted a familiar face, Charles Hamilton, CEO of Air Elite, the very airline Taylor Jet was planning to acquire. He stood with a group of executives and what appeared to be a crisis management team. As passengers began to disembark, many paused to offer words of support to Jasmine. Some shared their own stories of discrimination on flights, while others simply expressed outrage at what they had witnessed. The solidarity was touching, but Jasmine knew the real work lay ahead. When the cabin had emptied, Carlos approached one final time. "Ms. Washington," he said, using the name from her ticket, "they're ready for you now." The executive team is waiting in the VIP lounge. Jasmine gathered her belongings, including the damaged laptop. "Thank you for everything, Carlos," she said sincerely. "I hope we'll have the chance to work together again." "It would be my honor," he replied, not yet understanding the full meaning of her words. As Jasmine exited the aircraft, Raymond Phillips waited at the jet bridge alongside Charles Hamilton. Neither man recognized her in her casual attire, with her hair pulled back and face slightly swollen from the slap. MS. Washington, Raymond began with practiced corporate sympathy. "I'm Raymond Phillips, European Regional Director for TaylorJet. This is Charles Hamilton, CEO of Air Elite, one of our partner airlines. We'd like to escort you to a private lounge to discuss this unfortunate incident away from the media." Charles Hamilton extended his hand. "On behalf of the entire aviation community, I want to express our shock at what occurred. Rest assured, this kind of behavior has no place in our industry." Jasmine accepted his handshake without identifying herself. "I appreciate your concern, Mr. Hamilton. I'm looking forward to our discussion." The two executives exchanged puzzled glances at her calm demeanor and apparent familiarity with Hamilton's name, but they led her through a private security entrance, avoiding the waiting press. In the exclusive Air France first-class lounge, which had been cleared of other passengers, a team of legal and PR professionals waited. Sophia Chen had accompanied Jasmine, having appointed herself as impromptu legal counsel. "Before we begin," Charles Hamilton said once they were seated, "we want to assure you that TaylorJet takes full responsibility for this inexcusable incident. We're prepared to offer substantial compensation and a confidentiality agreement that would benefit all parties." Raymond Phillips nodded enthusiastically. "We've prepared documents outlining a generous settlement package, including lifetime premium travel privileges." Jasmine noticed they had already placed a non-disclosure agreement on the table. She picked it up, scanning it briefly before setting it aside. "That won't be necessary," she said calmly. "I understand you might want to consult with an attorney," Raymond continued, glancing at Sophia, "but I can assure you this offer is extremely generous. Our CEO, Ms. Taylor, has personally authorized the maximum compensation package." "Has she?" Jasmine asked, the corner of her mouth turning up slightly. Before Raymond could respond, the lounge door opened to admit Andre Johnson, striding in confidently with Jasmine's executive attire draped over his arm. Behind him followed three members of TaylorJet's executive team, their expressions a mixture of confusion and dawning realization. "I apologize for the delay," Andre announced smoothly, "but Paris traffic remains terrible, even for a crisis." Charles Hamilton frowned. "Excuse me, who are you?" "This is a private meeting." Andre smiled politely. "Andre Johnson, executive assistant to Jasmine Taylor." He turned to Jasmine. "Your suit, Ms. Taylor. The Beaumont Group has agreed to meet at 3 this afternoon instead of noon." The atmosphere in the room transformed instantly. Raymond Phillips' face drained of color as recognition finally dawned. Charles Hamilton froze mid-gesture, his mouth slightly open in shock. You're Jasmine Taylor." Raymond stammered. "The Jasmine Taylor?" "Last time I checked," Jasmine confirmed, standing to accept the garment bag from Andre. But you were in economy, in casual clothes." Raymond's confusion was evident. "I regularly travel on TaylorJet flights incognito to experience our service firsthand," Jasmine explained. A practice that proved quite illuminating on this particular journey. Charles Hamilton had recovered enough to attempt damage control. "Ms. Taylor, had we known it was you involved in this unfortunate incident, then what?" Jasmine interrupted, her voice still calm but now carrying the unmistakable authority of someone accustomed to commanding boardrooms. "The flight attendant would have been instantly fired rather than merely suspended. I would have been offered the maximum compensation package rather than being told I was imagining discrimination. The non-disclosure agreement would never have been presented." She gestured to the document still lying on the table. The correct response to a passenger being assaulted shouldn't depend on whether she's the CEO or a college student traveling home. The executives exchanged uncomfortable glances, no one quite sure how to respond. "If you'll excuse me," Jasmine continued, "I need to change for a press conference. The one where I'll announce that not only do I own the plane I was slapped on, but I'm also implementing sweeping changes to ensure this never happens to any passenger on any Taylor jet flight again." Charles Hamilton moved to block her path. "Jasmine, please, let's discuss this privately. Our acquisition talks will need to be reassessed in light of today's events," Jasmine finished for him. "I need to understand how deeply these issues run in Air Elite before proceeding with any merger." As Jasmine headed toward the lounge's private restroom to change, Andre handed her a tablet showing the latest news coverage. The story had exploded globally, with TaylorJet stock now down 12% and social media ablaze with calls for boycotts and reform. "The board is in emergency session," Andre informed her quietly. "They're split on how to respond." "They won't be for long," Jasmine replied with quiet confidence. What would you do if you were in Jasmine's position now? Would you use this incident to drive sweeping changes in the airline industry, or would you try to minimize the PR damage and move on? Comment number 1 if you think she should push for industry-wide reform, or number 2 if you think she should focus on rebuilding TaylorJet's image first. And don't forget to like and subscribe to see how Jasmine transforms this moment of humiliation into a powerful catalyst for change. But wait until you see the shocking revelation at the press conference. The Air France VIP lounge had transformed into an impromptu command center as Jasmine emerged from the restroom. Gone was the casual traveler in jeans and a t-shirt, replaced by the commanding presence of one of America's most successful CEOs. She wore a perfectly tailored navy suit, her natural hair now styled with precision, and diamond studs, small but unmistakably valuable, adorned her ears. The only remaining evidence of Brittany's assault was the slight swelling on her cheek, which makeup could only partially conceal. The transformation wasn't just physical. Jasmine's entire demeanor had shifted from the patient, accommodating passenger to the decisive business leader accustomed to controlling rooms much larger than this one. The executives who had been strategizing damage control now fell silent, watching her with new awareness. Andre handed her a smartphone to replace the basic model she'd been using incognito. "Latest updates," he said efficiently. "The video has reached 50 million views worldwide. Major news networks are running special segments on racism in the airline industry. TaylorJet stock has stabilized at -14% after initial reports that you were the passenger." Jasmine nodded, scanning the information. "And the Beaumont Group meeting? Still on for 3 p.m. They're watching the situation closely but haven't pulled out of acquisition talks." Charles Hamilton cleared his throat, attempting to regain control of the situation. "Jasmine, I understand you're upset, and rightfully so. But we need to consider the business implications here. A public spectacle won't benefit either of our companies." Jasmine turned to him with a level gaze. "Charles, I've spent my career being told to consider business implications whenever I've faced discrimination. The business implication I'm considering right now is that my company culture allowed an employee to physically assault me because of my race." Raymond Phillips, still visibly shaken by the revelation of her identity, attempted to intervene. "Ms. Taylor, we've already begun termination procedures for Ms. Brooks. The incident is being handled with the utmost seriousness." "Is it?" Jasmine challenged. "Because before you knew who I was, you offered me lifetime premium travel privileges and a non-disclosure agreement. That's not addressing a systemic problem, that's burying it." Outside the lounge, the media presence had grown. Cameras from international news networks lined the corridor, held back only by airport security. The story had transcended a simple case of airline misconduct. It had become symbolic of the discrimination faced by people of color regardless of their status or achievements. Sophia Chen, who had remained quietly observant throughout the exchange, spoke up. As legal counsel, I should note that any attempt to suppress this incident could be construed as corporate negligence, especially given the extensive video evidence and witness testimonies. Ms. Chen, Charles began condescendingly, with all due respect, you don't represent. Actually, Jasmine interrupted, Ms. Chen has been providing me with valuable counsel since the incident occurred. And she's right. This isn't going away with a settlement package. Jasmine's executive team, who had arrived with Andre, moved to stand supportively behind her. Among them was Diane Roberts, TaylorJet's chief communications officer, who had already drafted a statement acknowledging the incident without realizing her CEO was the victim. Diane, Jasmine addressed her directly, prepare the press room at our Paris office. I'll be making a statement in 1 hour. Are you sure that's wise? Charles protested. The markets are already reacting negatively. A press conference will only intensify the scrutiny. The markets are reacting to uncertainty, Jasmine countered. I'm going to provide clarity. As the executives debated strategy, the lounge door opened again to admit Gregory Walsh, the businessman who had recorded the incident. He appeared surprised to find himself in such distinguished company. I apologize for the interruption, he said. Airport security said I might find Ms. Washington here. The police need my video evidence for their report. Jasmine stepped forward. Mr. Walsh, thank you for coming. As you can see, there have been some developments since we landed. Gregory's eyes widened as recognition dawned. You're Jasmine Taylor. You own TaylorJet. I do, she confirmed. And your video documentation of what occurred on my aircraft will be invaluable as we address this situation. Charles Hamilton moved toward the door, lowering his voice. Jasmine, please. The Air Elite acquisition represents 18 months of negotiation and due diligence. Let's not jeopardize that over one employee's inexcusable but isolated behavior. Jasmine studied him carefully. Is it isolated, Charles? Because my experience suggests otherwise. Before proceeding with any acquisition, I need to understand Air Elite's culture regarding diversity and inclusion. Charles's expression hardened slightly. Our record speaks for itself. Does it? Jasmine challenged. Because from where I stand, the records of most airlines speak volumes about systemic problems they've chosen to ignore. The tension between them was palpable. What had been a straightforward business acquisition had evolved into something far more complex, a potential leverage point for industry-wide change. Andre approached with another update. The board has concluded their emergency meeting. They're unanimously supporting whatever course of action you choose to take. Jasmine nodded her appreciation. The board's support wasn't surprising, she held controlling interest in TaylorJet and had consistently delivered exceptional returns. But their unified backing would strengthen her position as she navigated this crisis. Shall we proceed to the press conference? Diane Roberts suggested, checking her watch. One moment, Jasmine said, turning back to Charles Hamilton. Charles, you have a choice to make. You can either join me at this press conference as a partner in addressing these issues, or you can oppose me and watch as Air Elite becomes a footnote in aviation history. Charles studied her, weighing his options. Finally, he nodded reluctantly. What do you need from me? A commitment to transparent review of Air Elite's diversity practices as part of our acquisition agreement, and your public support for industry-wide reforms. That could be expensive, Charles noted pragmatically. Not as expensive as doing nothing, Jasmine countered. With tentative agreement reached, the assembled group prepared to depart for TaylorJet's Paris office. As they gathered their belongings, Raymond Phillips approached Jasmine hesitantly. Ms. Taylor, I want to apologize for not recognizing you and for how this situation was initially handled. If I had known, that's precisely the problem, Raymond, Jasmine interrupted gently. No passenger should need to be a billionaire CEO to be treated with dignity and respect. Outside the VIP lounge, the waiting press immediately recognized Jasmine Taylor. Cameras flashed in rapid succession as security created a path through the crowd. Questions were shouted from all directions. Ms. Taylor, is it true you were the passenger assaulted on the flight? Were you traveling undercover to inspect your airline? Will you be pressing charges against the flight attendant? How will this incident affect TaylorJet's stock price? Jasmine moved through the chaos with practiced composure, offering only a brief statement. I'll be addressing all questions at a press conference within the hour. Thank you for your patience. The convoy of executive vehicles departed Charles de Gaulle Airport for TaylorJet's European headquarters in central Paris. During the drive, Jasmine reviewed the latest developments with her team. The incident had sparked a global conversation about race and privilege, with social media users sharing their own experiences of discrimination on airlines worldwide. The hashtag #FlyingWhileBlack is trending, Diane reported, scrolling through her tablet. People are using it to share similar stories. It's becoming a movement. This is bigger than one incident now, Andre observed. It's touching a nerve globally. Jasmine gazed out the window at Paris passing by, the city's beauty a stark contrast to the ugliness she had experienced hours earlier. It always was bigger than one incident, she said quietly. The only difference is now people are watching. At TaylorJet's Paris office, a hastily arranged press room was filled beyond capacity. Journalists from around the world crowded the space, cameras positioned strategically throughout. The company's stock price was displayed on monitors along one wall, its downward trajectory a visual reminder of the stakes involved. Backstage, final preparations were underway. Andre provided Jasmine with the latest information about Brittany Brooks, who was currently in custody at an Irish police station, facing potential assault charges. Legal had prepared various options regarding prosecution, civil suits, and potential settlement terms. Carlos Rivera had also been brought to the press conference at Jasmine's request. He stood nervously in a waiting area, still in his flight attendant uniform. Ms. Taylor, he began when she approached him, I had no idea. That was the point, she smiled reassuringly. And please, call me Jasmine. I feel terrible about what happened, Carlos continued. I should have intervened sooner when I saw how Brittany was treating you. You did intervene, Jasmine reminded him. Multiple times, in fact. That's why I wanted you here today. At precisely noon, Jasmine Taylor stepped onto the stage to face the assembled press. The flashes of cameras created a strobe-like effect as she took her position behind the podium. Charles Hamilton stood to one side, joined by TaylorJet's executive team and, somewhat unusually, Carlos in his flight attendant uniform. Good afternoon, Jasmine began, her voice steady and clear. I've called this press conference to address the incident that occurred aboard TaylorJet Flight 237 from New York to Paris, and to announce several important changes to our company policies going forward. She paused, looking directly into the cameras. Let me confirm what many have already speculated, I was the passenger who was assaulted by a TaylorJet flight attendant during that flight. A murmur rippled through the assembled journalists. I was traveling incognito, as I regularly do, to experience our service exactly as our customers do. What I experienced was a pattern of discriminatory behavior that culminated in a physical assault. This is completely unacceptable, not just because I happen to be the CEO and majority owner of TaylorJet, but because no passenger, regardless of their race, gender, or status, should ever be treated that way. She gestured to the monitors showing the company's plummeting stock price. Some will focus on the financial impact of this incident. I'm focused on the human impact and the changes needed to ensure this never happens again. Jasmine then outlined a comprehensive set of reforms for TaylorJet, including mandatory anti-bias training for all employees, revised hiring practices, the creation of an independent oversight committee for discrimination complaints, and a transparent reporting system for passengers to document their experiences. Furthermore, she continued, I'm announcing today that TaylorJet's acquisition of Air Elite will proceed with one significant addition to the agreement. She turned to Charles Hamilton, who nodded his reluctant assent. Air Elite will implement identical reforms as a condition of the merger, creating the industry's most progressive approach to diversity and inclusion. The press room erupted with questions, which Jasmine fielded with characteristic poise and directness. When asked about Brittany Brooks' future, Jasmine was unequivocal. Ms. Brooks's employment with Taylor Jet has been terminated, effective immediately. Whether criminal charges proceed is a matter for the legal authorities. However, this isn't just about one individual's actions. This is about acknowledging and addressing systemic problems that persist throughout the aviation industry and beyond. A journalist from CNN raised the question many were wondering, Ms. Taylor, you're worth billions of dollars. You literally own the plane you were sitting on. Yet you still faced this discrimination. What does that say about the state of racial equality in America? Jasmine's expression grew solemn. It says that wealth and status don't protect you from racism. They might cushion the impact, they might give you resources to fight back, but they don't prevent it. What happened to me happens to black women every day, usually without cameras recording and without the power to demand accountability. That's why this moment isn't just about Taylor Jet or me, it's about using this platform to create meaningful change. As the press conference concluded, Jasmine introduced Carlos Rivera, announcing his promotion to Senior Director of Customer Experience, a new executive position created to ensure service quality and inclusivity across all Taylor Jet operations. The markets responded immediately. Taylor Jet stock, which had been in free fall, began to stabilize and then gradually climb as investors responded to Jasmine's decisive leadership and clear vision for moving forward. Analysis from financial experts praised her approach as both ethically sound and strategically smart for the company's long-term health. Behind the scenes, as the press dispersed, Charles Hamilton approached Jasmine with newfound respect. That was masterful, he admitted. You turned what could have been devastating into an opportunity. It shouldn't take a crisis to drive progress, Jasmine replied, but sometimes that's what it takes. As they prepared to depart for the rescheduled Beaumont Group meeting, Jasmine received one final update from Andre. William Parker, the elderly passenger who had supported Brittany's actions during the flight, had requested a meeting with Jasmine. Attached to his request was a handwritten letter of apology. The world is watching now, Andre observed, scrolling through the continuing media coverage. This story isn't going away anytime soon. Jasmine nodded thoughtfully. Good. Because neither am I. The glittering ballroom of the Four Seasons Hotel George V in Paris was packed to capacity. 3 weeks had passed since the incident aboard Flight 237, and what had begun as a corporate crisis had evolved into something much more profound. Media from around the world crowded the space, cameras trained on the elegant podium adorned with the Taylor Jet logo, reimagined with new colors symbolizing the company's commitment to diversity and inclusion. Jasmine Taylor stood backstage, reviewing her notes one final time. The press conference she was about to hold would announce a series of unprecedented changes not just for Taylor Jet but potentially for the entire aviation industry. The events of the past 3 weeks had unfolded with breathtaking speed, each development building upon the last to create what the New York Times was already calling a watershed moment for corporate accountability. Andre approached with a tablet displaying the latest news coverage. Brittany Brooks's arraignment is scheduled for next Monday, he reported. The video evidence from Gregory Walsh and testimony from 27 other passengers left little room for defense. Her attorney is pushing for a plea deal that would include community service and mandatory diversity training instead of jail time. And the civil suit? Jasmine asked, though the lawsuit was more symbolic than financially motivated. Our legal team filed yesterday, Andre confirmed. The suit names not only Brittany but also challenges industry-wide practices that enable discriminatory behavior. It's already being described as a landmark case. Jasmine nodded, satisfied with the progress. The criminal charges against Brittany weren't about vengeance but accountability. Similarly, the civil lawsuit wasn't aimed at financial compensation but systemic reform. And Charles Hamilton, she inquired about the Air Elite CEO. Andre's expression tightened slightly. The Air Elite board voted this morning. He's been asked to step down, effective immediately. They've cited failure to maintain appropriate corporate culture as the official reason. This news wasn't entirely surprising. In the weeks following the incident, internal investigations at Air Elite had revealed a pattern of ignored discrimination complaints under Hamilton's leadership. When these findings became public, shareholders had demanded action. "They're asking if you'd recommend a replacement CEO as part of the acquisition process," Andre added. Jasmine made a mental note to discuss this during the press conference. The integration of Air Elite into Taylor Jet's operations was proceeding ahead of schedule, with the company's stock having not only recovered from its initial plunge but now trading at an all-time high. Investors had responded positively to Jasmine's decisive leadership and transparent approach to addressing the incident. Diane Roberts, Taylor Jet's communications director, appeared with final updates before the press conference began. "We've confirmed attendance from representatives of 12 major airlines, the International Air Transport Association, and aviation regulatory bodies from 9 countries," she reported. "They're all waiting to hear your announcement." The scale of interest reflected how what had begun as a single incident had catalyzed an industry-wide reckoning. In the weeks since the slap that had been viewed by over 100 million people worldwide, other videos of discriminatory treatment on various airlines had surfaced. The hashtag #FlyingWhileBlack had become a global movement, with travelers sharing experiences that ranged from subtle microaggressions to outright hostility. "The teleprompter is loaded with your final draft," Diane continued. "We're ready when you are." Jasmine glanced at the monitor showing the packed ballroom. In the front row, she spotted familiar faces: Sophia Chen, who had provided crucial legal support in the immediate aftermath, Gregory Walsh, whose video evidence had proven indisputable, and Carlos Rivera, now in an executive suit rather than a flight attendant uniform, embodying the meritocratic advancement opportunities Jasmine was working to expand. "Let's not keep them waiting," Jasmine decided, smoothing her jacket and checking her reflection one final time. The swelling from Brittany's slap had long since faded, but the impact of that moment continued to reverberate throughout the industry and beyond. As Jasmine walked onto the stage, the room erupted in applause. Camera flashes created a constellation of light as she took her position behind the podium. The applause continued longer than customary, carrying an undercurrent of respect for how she had transformed a moment of personal humiliation into a powerful force for change. "Thank you," she began when the room finally quieted. 3 weeks ago, I boarded one of my own aircraft as an anonymous passenger in economy class. What happened during that flight has been witnessed by millions around the world. Today, I want to talk about what happens next, not just for me, not just for Taylor Jet, but for an entire industry that has for too long allowed discrimination to persist unchallenged. Jasmine outlined the comprehensive findings of internal investigations conducted across Taylor Jet's operations. The results had been sobering. Despite the company's existing diversity policies, incidents of discrimination occurred with troubling frequency, particularly affecting passengers of color, those with disabilities, and religious minorities. What makes these findings especially disturbing, Jasmine continued, is that Taylor Jet was already considered an industry leader in inclusive practices. If these problems exist within our company, they almost certainly exist throughout the aviation sector. She then revealed the centerpiece of her announcement. The formation of the Airline Equality Initiative, an independent nonprofit organization funded initially by Taylor Jet but designed to work with all airlines to address discrimination within the industry. The initiative would develop standardized training programs, create confidential reporting mechanisms for passengers and employees, conduct regular audits of airline practices, and publish transparency reports tracking progress across carriers. I'm pleased to announce that as of this morning, 17 airlines representing 43% of global passenger traffic have committed to participating in this initiative, Jasmine revealed, triggering another round of applause. We expect that number to grow as consumers increasingly demand accountability from the companies they choose to fly with. The presentation shifted to more personal news. Taylor Jet stock had not only recovered but surged to new heights as the market responded to Jasmine's leadership. The Air Elite acquisition had been completed ahead of schedule, creating the world's third-largest airline group. Most significantly, customer bookings had increased by 22% since the incident, with surveys indicating that travelers were actively choosing TaylorJet because of its committed stance on equal treatment. This demonstrates that doing the right thing isn't just morally correct, it's good business, Jasmine emphasized. Consumers increasingly demand that companies reflect their values, not just through words but through measurable actions. She also addressed Brittany Brooks's situation directly. The former flight attendant now faced criminal charges and a civil lawsuit, but Jasmine revealed a surprising development. While Ms. Brooks must be held accountable for her actions, I believe in the possibility of redemption and growth, she stated. Therefore, TaylorJet has offered to convert part of any civil damages awarded into funding for Ms. Brooks to become educated in anti-bias training and eventually to participate in our corporate education programs, sharing her experience and the lessons she has learned. This unexpected show of grace generated murmurs throughout the room. It represented a nuanced approach that balanced accountability with compassion, holding Brittany responsible while offering a path forward that could transform her mistake into a force for positive change. As the press conference continued, Jasmine acknowledged key individuals who had stood up during the incident. Carlos Rivera's promotion to the executive team was formally announced, along with the creation of a scholarship program in his name for flight attendants seeking management careers. Sophia Chen had been appointed to lead the legal team for the Airline Equality Initiative, bringing her expertise in discrimination law to the organization's foundational work. Gregory Walsh had agreed to serve on the initiative's advisory board, representing the perspective of frequent business travelers. Even William Parker, the elderly passenger who had initially supported Brittany's actions, had undergone a remarkable transformation. After meeting privately with Jasmine and hearing her perspective, he had written a widely shared essay about confronting his own biases and assumptions. His grandchildren, inspired by his willingness to change, had applied for internships at TaylorJet's Diversity and Inclusion Department. This incident has reminded us of an essential truth, Jasmine said as she approached the conclusion of her remarks. Discrimination doesn't disappear simply because laws change or policies are written. It requires ongoing vigilance, education, and accountability. Most importantly, it requires all of us to speak up when we witness injustice, whether we're the target of that injustice or simply a bystander. She paused, looking across the assembled media representatives with determination in her eyes. My mother worked 3 jobs to raise me in Harlem. She taught me that dignity isn't something that can be taken from you, only surrendered. On that flight 3 weeks ago, I refused to surrender my dignity. Today, I'm asking an entire industry to find its dignity by acknowledging its failings and committing to measurable change. The standing ovation that followed lasted nearly 5 minutes. As Jasmine fielded questions from journalists, the recurring theme was clear: what had begun as a shocking incident of discrimination had catalyzed a movement that transcended one company or even one industry. The conversation had expanded to examine how power, privilege, and race intersected in all aspects of American society. When asked whether the attention would eventually fade, allowing old patterns to re-emerge, Jasmine's response was characteristically direct. This isn't a news cycle to me, it's my life's work, she stated firmly. Long after the cameras move on to the next story, we will continue pushing for change. The difference now is that millions of people are watching, and they'll hold not just TaylorJet but all airlines accountable for delivering on their promises. As the formal proceedings concluded, Jasmine found a moment to speak privately with her executive team. Despite the positive reception to her initiatives, she knew the real work was just beginning. Changing entrenched attitudes and behaviors would require sustained effort over years, not weeks. Today was the easy part, she told them candidly. Making these changes stick, that's the challenge ahead. Andre nodded in agreement. The board is fully behind you. After seeing the market response, even the most profit-focused directors recognize that this is both the right thing to do and smart business. Jasmine's phone buzzed with a message from her mother, Loretta Taylor, who had watched the press conference via live stream from New York. So proud of you, baby girl. You didn't just stand up for yourself, you're standing up for all of us who've ever been told to know our place." Reading her mother's words, Jasmine felt the full circle moment. From their small Harlem apartment to this international stage, the journey had been extraordinary. Yet the fundamental values that guided her remained unchanged: dignity, equality, and the courage to demand both. As she prepared to leave the press conference, a young black flight attendant from another airline approached her hesitantly. "Ms. Taylor," the young woman began, "I just wanted to say thank you. What you're doing, it matters to all of us. I've experienced similar treatment but never had the power to challenge it. You're using your position to fight for people like me, and we see that." This simple expression of gratitude, more than the stock prices or media coverage, validated Jasmine's approach. The incident aboard Flight 237 had been painful and humiliating, but it had created an opening for voices that had too long gone unheard. "We're just getting started," Jasmine assured her with a warm smile. "And we're going to need dedicated professionals like you to help lead the way." The young woman straightened with newfound confidence. "Count me in." As Jasmine finally exited the ballroom, flanked by her team, she spotted Charles Hamilton waiting near the elevators. The former Air Elite CEO approached with a humble demeanor quite different from his previous corporate arrogance. "You've changed the industry in 3 weeks," he acknowledged, extending his hand. "I underestimated you, and I paid the price for that mistake. But I want you to know, I get it now. What you're doing isn't just right, it's necessary." Jasmine accepted his handshake. "It shouldn't have taken a crisis to make that clear, Charles." "No," he agreed solemnly. "It shouldn't have. But sometimes we need to be shaken out of our comfortable assumptions. Consider me thoroughly shaken." As her car waited to take her to the next in an endless series of meetings, Jasmine reflected on how a routine flight had become a defining moment not just in her career but potentially in the evolution of an entire industry. The path forward wouldn't be simple or straightforward, but she had never shied away from complex challenges. Indeed, she had built her success by tackling problems others deemed impossible to solve. The media had already moved on to labeling the incident with catchy phrases: "The slap that changed aviation," or "How a billionaire's cheek changed an industry." But for Jasmine, it wasn't about headlines or even her personal experience. It was about ensuring that the next black woman who boarded a plane wouldn't have to wonder if she would be treated with basic human dignity. That was a legacy worth building, one flight at a time. 6 months after the incident that became known in aviation circles simply as the slap, Jasmine Taylor stood on the tarmac at JFK International Airport. Behind her gleamed the flagship aircraft of Equinox Air, the revolutionary new airline division she had launched under the Taylor Jet corporate umbrella. The plane's distinctive livery featured a gradient from deep purple to brilliant orange, symbolizing the transition from darkness to dawn, a visual metaphor for the changes sweeping through the industry. "Ready for the ribbon cutting, Ms. Taylor?" asked a nervous young event coordinator, glancing anxiously at the assembled crowd of media representatives, aviation officials, and selected guests. "Just one moment," Jasmine replied, taking in the scene with quiet satisfaction. The journey to this moment had been intense. In the months following the Paris press conference, Jasmine had divided her time between running Taylor Jet's expanding operations and building the framework for Equinox Air, a carrier specifically designed around principles of equality, respect, and exemplary service for all passengers regardless of background. The concept had initially been met with skepticism from industry analysts who questioned whether focusing so heavily on inclusivity could be profitable. Those doubts had been silenced when advance ticket sales for Equinox's inaugural routes sold out within hours of being announced. The public had spoken with their wallets, demonstrating a clear market for an airline that prioritized treating every passenger with dignity. Andre approached, tablet in hand as always. "Final checks complete. The crew is ready, and we've received clearance for the ceremonial flight." "And our special guests?" Jasmine inquired. "All present and accounted for," Andre confirmed with a slight smile. "Including Ms. Brooks." Brittany Brooks's journey over the past 6 months had been nearly as transformative as the industry changes her actions had inadvertently triggered. Following her arraignment, she had accepted a plea deal that included community service, a suspended sentence, and mandatory participation in an intensive anti-bias training program developed by social justice educators. The civil case had been resolved with an unusual settlement. Rather than monetary damages, Brittany had agreed to complete a certification program in diversity education and to share her experience as a cautionary tale in corporate training sessions. Today marked her first official appearance as part of that agreement, a symbolic moment that represented Jasmine's commitment to redemption alongside accountability. Jasmine spotted Brittany standing nervously at the edge of the gathering, dressed conservatively and visibly uncomfortable with the attention. Their private meetings over recent months had been difficult but productive, with Brittany gradually coming to terms with the biases that had influenced her behavior and working to address them. "Shall we begin?" the event coordinator prompted again. Jasmine nodded, moving toward the podium that had been set up beside the aircraft's boarding stairs. As she took her position, cameras focused on her, and the assembled crowd fell silent. 6 months ago, Jasmine began, an incident occurred that could have simply resulted in one person losing their job and another receiving a settlement. Instead, it became the catalyst for reimagining what air travel could and should be for everyone. She gestured toward the gleaming Equinox airplane behind her. "Today, we launch not just a new airline but a new standard for the industry. Equinox Air was built from the ground up with one core principle. Every passenger deserves respect, dignity, and excellent service, not because of their status, wealth, or appearance, but because that's the baseline of human decency." The crowd applauded as Jasmine outlined the features that distinguished Equinox from other carriers, crew members selected not just for technical qualifications but for demonstrated emotional intelligence, transparent pricing that eliminated the predatory fee structures common throughout the industry. Seating designed for comfort regardless of ticket class, and perhaps most significantly, a zero-tolerance policy for discrimination backed by continuous training and robust accountability measures. "But Equinox isn't just about what happens on our aircraft," Jasmine continued. "It's about creating pathways into aviation for communities historically excluded from these careers." She introduced the Loretta Taylor Foundation, named for her mother, which provided scholarships and mentoring for young people from underrepresented backgrounds pursuing careers in aviation. The foundation's first class of 50 scholars stood together near the podium, representing the future faces of an industry in transformation. "Change doesn't happen through policies alone," Jasmine emphasized. "It happens through people committed to making those policies reality every day." With that transition, she invited Carlos Rivera to join her at the podium. In the months since his promotion to TaylorJet's executive team, Carlos had distinguished himself as a natural leader, implementing customer experience innovations that had been adopted throughout the company's operations. Now, he would serve as Equinox Air's first president, bringing his frontline experience and commitment to service excellence to the new venture. "When I was a flight attendant, I saw daily how differently passengers were treated based on factors that had nothing to do with their behavior," Carlos stated after thanking Jasmine. "With Equinox, we're creating an environment where every interaction is based on respect, for our passengers and for our crew members. This isn't just good ethics, it's good business." The ceremony continued with additional speakers, including Sophia Chen, who had transitioned from her private law practice to become general counsel for the Airline Equality Initiative. The independent organization, now backed by 29 carriers representing over 60% of global passenger traffic, had already implemented standardized reporting mechanisms for discrimination complaints and begun publishing transparency reports that ranked airlines on their inclusion metrics. For the first time, passengers can make informed choices based not just on price and schedule, but on how airlines treat all their customers, Sophia explained. "This market pressure is driving improvements faster than regulations alone ever could." Gregory Walsh, now serving on the initiative's advisory board while continuing his executive role at a tech company, spoke about the perspective of business travelers who collectively represented billions in annual revenue for airlines. Companies are increasingly directing their corporate travel accounts toward carriers that align with their stated values on diversity and inclusion, he reported. The business case for change has become undeniable. As the ceremony approached its most significant moment, Jasmine invited Brittany Brooks to join her at the podium. A murmur went through the crowd. This unexpected reconciliation had not been announced in advance. Brittany approached hesitantly, visibly nervous as she faced the audience. When she spoke, her voice trembled slightly but gained strength as she continued. 6 months ago, I committed an inexcusable act that was captured on video for the world to see, she began. What wasn't visible in that video were the biases and assumptions that led to my behavior, prejudices I didn't even recognize in myself until forced to confront them. She described her journey through the justice system, the intensive therapy and education she had undergone, and the difficult process of examining deeply held beliefs about race and status that had influenced her actions. I don't stand here asking for forgiveness, Brittany stated clearly. I stand here as evidence that people can change when they're willing to do the uncomfortable work of confronting their own biases. My role now is to help others recognize and address prejudices before they lead to harmful actions. Jasmine then revealed that Brittany would be joining Equinox's training department, not as a flight attendant but as part of a team developing anti-bias education for aviation personnel across multiple airlines. The position represented both accountability for past actions and an opportunity to transform that experience into meaningful prevention efforts. The symbolism of their joint appearance, the billionaire CEO and the flight attendant who had assaulted her now standing together in service of a larger mission, was not lost on anyone present. It embodied Jasmine's approach to addressing discrimination, firm accountability coupled with genuine opportunities for growth and redemption. As the ceremony transitioned to the ribbon cutting for Equinox's inaugural flight, Jasmine was joined by a special guest, her mother, Loretta Taylor, who had flown in from New York for the occasion. The 70-year-old woman who had once worked 3 jobs to support her family now stood proudly beside her daughter, their matching smiles reflecting the extraordinary journey from Harlem to aviation history. "Mom, would you do the honors?" Jasmine asked, handing Loretta the ceremonial scissors. As Loretta cut the purple ribbon stretched across the boarding stairs, the crowd erupted in applause. Mother and daughter embraced briefly before turning to board the aircraft, leading the assembled dignitaries onto the plane for its ceremonial first flight, a 90-minute journey that would circle the New York area before returning to JFK. Inside the aircraft, the Equinox difference was immediately apparent. Gone were the stark class divisions that characterized most airlines. While there were still fair differences, all seats provided comfortable space and amenities. The crew, diverse in every sense, greeted each passenger with the same warm professionalism regardless of their ticket type or appearance. As the plane taxied toward the runway, Jasmine settled into a seat beside her mother. Loretta took her daughter's hand, emotion evident in her eyes. "When you were a little girl reading those library books about airplanes, I never imagined this," she said softly. "I just wanted you to have opportunities one didn't have. You made this possible," Jasmine replied, squeezing her mother's hand. "Everything I am started with what you taught me about dignity and perseverance." The engines roared as the aircraft accelerated down the runway, lifting smoothly into the clear blue sky above New York. From her window seat, Jasmine could see the Manhattan skyline in the distance, including the gleaming Taylor Jet Tower that housed her company's headquarters. The past 6 months had transformed not just her business but the entire conversation around race and service in the aviation industry. Harvard Business School now used the incident as a case study in crisis management and corporate responsibility. Industry publications that had initially predicted TaylorJet stock would suffer long-term damage now referenced the Taylor method of turning potential disaster into opportunity through transparent leadership and meaningful action. Most significantly, passengers across all airlines were reporting measurable improvements in how they were treated. The transparency reports published by the Airline Equality Initiative showed declining rates of discrimination complaints industry-wide, as carriers competed not just on price and routes but on their inclusion metrics. During the flight, Jasmine moved throughout the cabin, speaking with guests and crew members alike. When she reached the galley where flight attendants were preparing beverage service, she found a young black woman who reminded her of herself 20 years earlier. "Ms. Taylor," the flight attendant said with barely contained excitement, "I have to tell you, I applied to Equinox because of what happened 6 months ago. Watching you stand up for yourself and then create systemic change instead of just accepting an apology, it showed me what's possible." "What's your name?" Jasmine asked. "Zoe Williams," the young woman replied. "This is my first week after completing training." "Well, Zoe Williams," Jasmine said warmly, "remember this moment the next time someone tells you one person can't change an industry. Sometimes all it takes is refusing to accept the unacceptable." As the flight completed its ceremonial journey and returned to JFK, Jasmine reflected on the winding path that had led to this day. The painful sting of Brittany's slap had long since faded, but its impact continued to ripple through the aviation world and beyond. What could have been merely a humiliating experience had instead become a turning point, not just for her personally, but for an industry that had too long allowed discrimination to persist unchallenged. When the aircraft touched down and taxied to the terminal, another crowd awaited, this time including hundreds of Equinox employees eager to celebrate the official launch of their airline. As Jasmine descended the stairs with her mother, the assembled staff cheered, many holding signs welcoming the new carrier to the skies. Among the waiting crowd, Jasmine spotted a familiar face, the new flight attendant who had approached her at the Paris press conference 6 months earlier. Now dressed in Equinox's distinctive uniform, the young woman stood tall with newfound confidence. Their eyes met briefly across the tarmac, an unspoken acknowledgement passing between them. This was just the beginning. Later that evening, after the celebrations had concluded and the inaugural flight was officially recorded in aviation history, Jasmine returned to her office in Taylor Jet Tower. The wall of windows offered a panoramic view of New York City glittering beneath the night sky, aircraft lights tracing patterns above as they approached and departed area airports. Andre entered with a final update for the day. "Equinox's booking system nearly crashed from demand after today's launch coverage," he reported. "We're already expanding the initial route network to accommodate passenger interest." "And the Airline Equality Initiative's latest survey?" Jasmine asked. 82% of respondents reported noticing improvement in how airlines treat passengers of color and other minority groups, Andre confirmed. "That's up 12 points from last quarter." Jasmine nodded, satisfied with the progress while recognizing how much work remained. "Send me the detailed metrics tomorrow. I want to identify the carriers falling behind so we can offer targeted assistance." As Andre departed, Jasmine stood alone at the window, reflecting on the journey that had brought her here. From the little girl in Harlem who dreamed of flying to the billionaire who had transformed an industry, and all because she had refused to accept being slapped on her own plane. Her phone chimed with a message from Carlos. First regular Equinox flight just landed in Chicago. Perfect service ratings across the board. This is really happening. Jasmine smiled, typing back a simple response, just the beginning. Jasmine Taylor's story demonstrates that discrimination exists at every level of society, affecting even billionaires. What makes this story powerful isn't just the shocking slap, but how Jasmine transformed her humiliation into systemic change. By refusing to accept discrimination as inevitable, she created industry-wide accountability. The story reminds us that true power lies not in wealth or position but in how we respond to injustice. Jasmine could have settled privately, but instead chose to address the root causes of discrimination. Her approach balanced accountability with redemption, showing that meaningful change requires both justice and compassion. We also see the importance of allies like Carlos, Sophia, and Gregory, who chose to speak up rather than remain silent witnesses. Their actions remind us that confronting discrimination is everyone's responsibility, not just the victims. Perhaps most importantly, the story illustrates that organizational culture reflects leadership values. When leaders prioritize dignity and respect for all, regardless of status or background, that commitment permeates the entire organization and transforms the customer experience. The lesson is clear. Change happens when we refuse to accept discrimination as normal, when we use whatever platform we have to demand better, and when we recognize that treating everyone with dignity isn't just morally right, it's also good business. What would you do if you witnessed discrimination on a flight? Would you speak up like Gregory or stay silent? Has this story changed how you'll respond in similar situations? Comment below with your thoughts, and don't forget to like, subscribe, and share this story if it inspired you to stand against discrimination in your own life. Thank you for joining us on this journey with Jasmine Taylor, from a shocking slap to industry-wide transformation. Remember, change begins when we refuse to accept the unacceptable, whether we're billionaires or ordinary passengers just trying to reach our destination with dignity intact.